Good afternoon from Washington, D.C., and welcome to everyone tuning in from around the world. My name is Marcus Garlauskas, and I'm the director of the Indo-Pacific Security Initiative at the Atlantic Council Scowcroft Center for Strategy and Security, better known as IPSI. Thanks for joining us at today's event, Envisioning the Threat to Taiwan, a Cross-Strait and Beyond seminar. This is sponsored by the Taipei Economic and Cultural Representative Office in the United States, known as TECRO. Now entering its third year, IPSI's Cross-Strait and Beyond seminar series is a premier platform for informing public discussion on key issues for Taiwan and the United States. Today, we'll be discussing the role of strategic communications and compelling depictions in raising public awareness of the threat that the PRC poses to Taiwan. As we observe the PRC's massive military buildup and its escalating coercion in the region, it's more important than ever that Taiwan and its friends around the world come to better understand the threat that the PRC poses, and then to move with urgency on whole of society efforts to bolster resilience, to sustain Taiwan's will to resist, along with a range of measures to deter and defend against a potential attack. To this end, we're pleased to have a distinguished panel with us this afternoon, including two joining from Taiwan. I'm very sorry about the terrible hour it is there in Taipei. We have two key members of the production team for Zero Day Attack, a forthcoming television series depicting a fictional PRC invasion of Taiwan. We have executive producer Mr. Chin Chang Lin and screenwriter producer Hin Mei Chang. They will be joined by General U.S. Air Force retired Michael Minahan, and DFR Lab's senior resident fellow and IPSI fellow Kenton Thibault, both U.S. experts in the threat that China poses. Now, to help introduce and frame today's discussion, it's my honor to welcome Taiwan's representative to the United States, Ambassador Tairei Yu, who has joined us to provide some opening remarks. Ambassador Yu is a distinguished diplomat with nearly 40 years of experience in Taipei and around the world, including service as Vice Foreign Minister and Ambassador to Paraguay. Ambassador, thank you so much for taking the time to be here. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Marcus, for your introduction, and all the online participants to this seminar talking on my country, Taiwan, and the threat that we may face in the straits, and hi to all the panelists, especially from Taiwan, the early risers. Very happy to be participating in this event, especially also very timely. We're doing this in the eve of a very large military parade that is going to be held in Beijing in a few hours to celebrate their so-called the PRC's achievements in defeating the Japanese during World War II, which is a fallacy because they didn't exist back then. But anyways, but I think it's related to the large military display that the Chinese PRC PLA are demonstrating through their parade. It's a way of aggression and intimidation, not only to Taiwan but to the First Island chain and beyond. So today's seminar, which is discussing mainly based on the TV series Zero Day Attack, I want to congratulate the producer and the screenwriter producer. I saw the first episode, and I can't wait to see the rest of the 9. A lot of intrigue, a lot of suspense. But this is a TV series, it's high drama, and I hope that we'll keep it that way. Just a TV series that never happens, because if that happens, means we'll be involved in a war, in conflict, and that's means a lot of victims, a lot of the whole world be affected. But also. This Zero Day Attack. It's a good way to raise awareness to Taiwanese people and the world about what the aggression comes, what we face as aggression. It's not just military display of machines and uniformed men landing on beaches and attacking the island, but also all sorts of things that come with it, and it's already happening. The cyber attacks, the gray zone tactics, the intimidation, or even trying to infiltrate, creating domestic chaos in Taiwan. All of that, I think, is displayed very, very thoughtfully and very dramatically in the Zero Day Attacks TV series, which is a good way to also raise awareness of Taiwanese people of what we're facing today. But I think two words stands out in the first episode that I saw, especially coming out from the president-elect, and it's freedom and democracy. And that is the reason why we are confronting the mainland China, the PRC, throughout these years. And that's what we stand for, the values that we cherish, and we want to live in freedom and democracy. So again, I just want to congratulate the team for having this TV series, and also look forward to listening to the panelists in the coming discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. Really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us and provide those remarks. I was particularly struck by something that you said, which mirrors what we heard in our last visit to Taipei, is that in some ways the attack has already begun, right? Is that what we're seeing right now could be, in retrospect, turn out to be the early stages of an attack on Taiwan. And so the idea now is to deter the PRC from going any further, and then, of course, if it comes to it, be prepared to work together to defend against PRC aggression. So with that, before we begin our panel discussion, I just wanted to provide some quick background on our program. Convenings like this one are integral to the Atlantic Council Scowcroft Center's mission of developing sustainable nonpartisan strategies to address the most important security challenges facing the United States and the world. The Indo-Pacific Security Initiative, IPSI, is one of the Scowcroft Center's 4 programs, and through written analysis, tabletop exercises, and public and private events, we inform, shape the strategies, plans, and policies of the United States and its allies and partners to address the key rising security challenges in the Indo-Pacific. And we lead the Council's Tiger Project on war and deterrence in the Indo-Pacific, which addresses, in part, how to deter a PRC attack on Taiwan, like the one that we're about to discuss, depicted by the Zero-Day Attack film or show. Now, I'd like to turn to the Zero-Day Attack team, and we'll be able to watch the trailer. But first, I'd like to introduce the production team members that we have joining us today. Mr. Xin-Chang Lin is the executive producer of Zero-Day Attack and a prominent figure in Taiwan's public literary and cultural sectors. Mr. Lin held several key posts in Taiwan's government. As a consultant and later as Deputy Secretary General of the National Security Council, he played an integral role in shaping policy and strategic communications on matters of critical national importance. A passionate advocate for the arts and social equity, Mr. Lin co-founded the Paper Windmill Theater's 368 Township Children's Art, bringing quality arts education and performances to children in every corner of Taiwan, including rural and underserved communities. Now, also joining us today is Ms. Hinmei Cheng, screenwriter and producer of Zero-Day Attack. A Golden Bell Award recipient and former journalist, she's renowned for her nuanced portrayals of East Asian democracy, media, and identity. From the newsroom to her accomplished career as a screenwriter, she has consistently captured the dynamic pulse of Taiwan's political and cultural landscape. Her major works include Zero-Day Attack, The Making of an Ordinary Man, The Mirror Forest, Island Nation, The Teenage Psychic, and Brighter Days. Mr. Lin and Ms. Cheng, over to you to tell us a little bit more about your work.
Good afternoon and good morning, dear friends. I'm Xin-Chang Lin, executive producer of Zero-Day Attack. This year marks 80 years since the end of World War II. In these 8 decades, the people of Taiwan have worked tirelessly, building a strong economy, carrying out democratic reforms, and proving that freedom and democracy are not just ideals, but a way of life worth protecting. Unfortunately, our neighbor China has chosen a very different path and has never given up his ambitions of using force. But the people of Taiwan love peace. We take our place in the global democratic community with pride, and we speak with one voice. Taiwan is not Hong Kong. Taiwan will never be the next Ukraine. And the Taiwanese people will never give up our way of life in freedom and democracy. Drama may be fiction, but war is painfully real. Zero-Day Attack shows what happens when the shadow of war falls on ordinary people. It's about fear and courage. weakness and strength, and above all, love and devotion to family and homeland. Most people don't want to discuss politics every day, but a comparing TV drama with a cold beer at night, that's something everyone enjoys. Through storytelling, we hope to spark reflection on the challenges Taiwan might face and to remind people that the best way to prevent war is to understand it and be prepared. I hope you enjoy this series, and I believe our friends in the Alliance of Democratic Values will always stand with Taiwan. Thank you so much.
Sherlyn, thank you.
Okay, and yeah. Hi, I'm May, and I'm the producer of Zero Day and Zero Day Attack. Zero Day Attack is a work born out of anger and fear. In Taiwan, film production is deeply influenced by China. Even if I don't work in China and I don't unfold the Chinese market, every contract I receive will have a Chinese term, no political speech, which means I could not express my thought on Taiwan and China on social media or in public. I can't even express support for the Hong Kong protest or participate in Taiwan's democratic activities. Worse still, my script often have to revised because of the Chinese communists, and that there can't be any mention of Taiwan having a question. The national flag cannot appear in the police station, and there can't be any mention of Taiwan history. We have to make the entire story seems like Taiwan doesn't exist. Taiwan is clearly a free and democratic country, so why is our creative work so deeply restricted by Chinese communists? This makes me extremely angry. The outbreak of Ukraine war in 2022 deepened my anger. I feel that if I didn't write something about Taiwan, I might never have the chance again. What should I really write about is the trade from China since 1949. Taiwanese people have lived in the shadow of war over 70 years. Yet, no film or television production has ever addressed this subject by Taiwanese people. So don't you feel that's weird? China's control and the threat against Taiwan are growing ever greater now. Taiwan can now feel the interference by China gray zone world on many levels. Zero-day attacks explores how Taiwanese people cope with this interference. It sounds serious, but this kind of war is about the manipulation of human nature. It's a very interesting drama, and I hope you all can enjoy it.
All right, and thank you so much. And I'm really looking forward to watching the show, and I do hope that it's able to be broadcast here in the United States soon. I understand the show's only on its 5th episode airing in Taiwan, so there's still great questions about where it's going to go next and how it's going to end. And so I'm very excited to learn more about the show and to talk about the bigger picture of how this fits in, as you both alluded to the larger view of how to help prepare for and maybe even prevent this possibility of aggression from the PRC against Taiwan.
今天台湾人用选票写下历史，告诉全世界我们拥抱和平的决心。
请问你们全家都放弃美国国籍了吗？
这个问题我们已经回答过了。然后其实 Oliver 其实。
中共的一架运发侦察机是在今天早上10点越过南海，在东台湾太平洋坠海消失。 接着，共军就以搜救的名义出动大批海空军往东海以及南海挺进。目前，大批的海空军形同包围台湾岛。
准备第一个案子。全台网络断讯已经超过24小时。这是飞弹吗？
你去问资讯部，你去问国防部，看真的假的。
如果真的要打仗了，我们怎么办？
谁管台湾怎么样了？我可以天天跟你在一起就好了。
阿丹加兰呐，你觉得神明还会保佑我们吗？
你已经上黑名单了。
那我们全力一起留在台湾。
你以为战争是开玩笑的？
战争逃去帝国才是开玩笑吧？
僕たちは重要な情報を持ってる。戦争に関わる話だ。
你们大家已经离开明德大饭店了。
你要对方投降，不是要把他打死，就要把他吓死。
真的要开战了是吗？
战争早就已经开始了。
以后我们就是一家人。
So now we're going to move to the moderated discussion and the audience Q&A portion of the event. And so after some initial questions from me, we'll be drawing questions from our global audience. So for those of you watching, don't forget to submit your questions for our speakers to askac.org. And so first, I'd like to introduce, though, the other distinguished panelists that we have here today. General Mike Minahan is a distinguished military leader with over 3 decades of service in the United States Air Force. He served in several key positions in the Air Force and in joint commands, including as commander of Air Mobility Command and as the deputy commander of U.S. Indo-Pacific Command, and of course, as the chief of staff of U.S. Forces Korea in the capacity in which we first met. Now, throughout his military career, General Minahan was instrumental in shaping air mobility operations, ensuring the rapid and reliable transportation of troops, equipment, and supplies to support military and humanitarian missions worldwide. And I think General Minahan has become known as one of the most articulate and strident leaders to warn about the growing threat posed by the PRC. So it's really a pleasure, General, to have you here on this broadcast. And then Kenton Thibault is a senior resident China fellow at the Atlantic Council's Digital Forensic Research Lab and a senior resident fellow with us here at IPSI. She leads China programming for the Democracy and Tech Initiative and serves as the head of China research and principal investigator for projects analyzing China's role in global technology ecosystem and its foreign policy priorities in the digital space. Before joining the DFR lab, she spent 5 years in the private sector, specializing in Chinese government relations for multinational companies. So, General Ken, thank you both for joining us. I'd like to go to you first for some initial comments and reactions to what we just heard, and then we'll go into the actual Q&A. So, General, perhaps you can begin with you. What are your thoughts at this point?
Certainly. Hey, first of all, thank you to the Atlantic Council for having me. It's an absolute honor. Congratulations to the Zero-Day Attack team. It's an incredible trailer, and I join the others that say we can't wait for it to come to the U.S. so that we can view it as well. And I was quite stricken in the most powerful way by all the comments so far. So, and Marcus, I'm going to warn you, I'm in advance on a question here, because I thought in the trailer, the most powerful and most important, poignant statement that was made in the trailer was when the female asked, is the war really coming? And the gentleman replies, the war started long ago. And that's exactly how I feel. The ambassador nailed that. Mr. Lin nailed that. Ms. Cheng nailed that. The war started long ago. We're being contested and prepped in all domains. We don't have to do the math on what we think they might do. They're already broadcasting exactly what they're going to do. They don't have any concern for rules-based order or international laws or even professional etiquette. And we know that their intentions are very clear. Our job, my job, certainly in my previous life in wearing uniform, is to drive extreme readiness. Readiness it's a 2-for-1 deal. The readiness that offers deterrent lens, in which we want any adversary to look at us and say, I don't want a piece of that. I don't want any part of what the United States and its allies and partners are bringing, is also the same readiness that delivers decisive victory. So you get 2-for-1 out of that. Our job in uniform is to give our elected officials all the tools necessary to win should they decide to use military force. So I'm a big proponent of readiness. I'm a big proponent of the message that this movie and this series is portraying. I'll end on one final note here. 4 administrations in a row in the United States have sounded the alarm on the China concern. Whether you go back to President Obama's pivot to the Pacific, you go back to Trump on the national defense strategy, and then Biden followed it up, and now Trump's back. 4 administrations in a row have been very clear, but it's time to put the resourcing and the action behind that concern. And I do believe we've got a unique opportunity right now during this time with certainly with productions like these, with heightened awareness and with the resourcing that could come in the current political climate, could be very powerful, where we really can deliver on that readiness, hopefully to deter. But if deterrence fails, decisive victory is assured. So thank you.
General, thank you very much for those powerful comments. Really appreciate, again, you taking the time, and I can't think of anyone better to help deliver that message. So thank you, General. Ken, your thoughts?
Yeah, so just wanted to also echo General Minahan's comments and say how poignant and human and beautifully shot the 0 Day series is. I'm only on episode 2, though the ambassador did drop a spoiler in the green room, so thanks a lot for that. But yes, so kind of picking up on one of the quotes that the general is talking about, the idea that Taiwan's been fighting this war for a long time. In this trailer, you really see how much of this conflict is an information war, especially in the beginning stages. But Taiwan has been fighting this information war for decades at this point. And so later on in the conversation, I'll get into maybe what this sort of information aspect of this will look like, perhaps as things kind of would unfold past a 0 Day scenario. There are different audiences that China needs to communicate with and will communicate with, narratives that have been sown in advance, infrastructure online that's been built up in advance to deploy these narratives. But one thing I would like to kind of really go back to is this idea of how the human stories that are told throughout the 0 Day series is one of the sort of core advantages that Taiwan has. The ambassador was talking about freedom and democracy. Taiwan has the ability to show these really human stories, to humanize Taiwan's society, to show the human experience of war, of conflict, of the impacts of such an action and what it would look like to the international community. And this is a real advantage and a real sort of both a reflection and a source of Taiwan's resilience, is the ability to tell the stories of its own people. So I'll leave it at that, leave the sort of nitty-gritty information operation stuff for later, but just wanted to lead with that kind of first impression.
Kenton, thanks so much. Really, again, appreciate you taking the time with us as well and bringing your expertise to this. And I love the fact that also you use the word resilience, right? Because there's informational resilience and how information and how these sorts of messages and different products of not just knowledge, but even entertainment can actually help increase resilience. So I think that's great, and I appreciate you your comments. Looking forward to hearing more your thoughts about some of the specific tactics and capabilities that the PRC could employ and how that relates to what we see in the show. So now I'd like to return to Mr. Lin. Given that you were the Deputy Secretary General of Taiwan's National Security Council, among other positions in government, I think you got a unique perspective. It's pretty different, I would say, than compared to most executive producers of a television show. So how did you find that this experience you had as a government official, how did that inform your thinking about the show? Did you find that what you were bringing was different? Do you have an example maybe that you can think of that how that experience in government informed your approach to an aspect of this important project?
I'm sorry about my English, so I will respond this question in Mandarin.
So I joined during the first term of the DPP government from 2001 to 2008. I served in the government for several positions. And so when I was in the National Security Council, I was actually also in charge of tackling the situation of cross-strait relations. So at the time, we were trying to tackle with the legal like 3 different wars scenarios, like war of public opinion, war of law, and legal war, and also the war of mental war. So we actually also need to hold a military simulation at the time and trying to create the different scenarios, how Chinese CCP would attack Taiwan. And so at the time, we were actually trying, experience with a lot of scenarios and experience of that. And so, 2 years ago when Xinmei approached me saying that they are trying to, write a series about this cross-strait war drama. And I was actually also astonished, like they're really bold, they really like trying to do something that we really need. So actually, I was happy to be invited to join the team. And actually, also based on the experience I had, I actually can really bring our know-how into the show. And we also are trying to, invite some experts as our consultant for this script. And from the military side or from political side, we're trying to bring the know-how into that show. But as I said, a lot of scenarios depicted in this series actually still quite simple. It's just like a frame. We're just trying to bring out the possible situation. And yeah, so that's the reason why I joined the team. That's how I joined that team. Yes, thank you.
这么杰出的影视作品，麻烦 David。
This one, thank you very much. That's great, and that really adds, I think, to the credibility of zero-day attack. And of course, Ms. Cheng too. You bring your own background to this project, and being a journalist, I'm sure you already had a lot of knowledge, a lot of ideas that you developed before working on the show. And so, but I suspect you did some additional research as you were developing. And of course, we just heard from Mr. Lin about some of the experts that were consulted for the show. So what sort of research did you do? Was there's something new that you learned in the course of making the show and the course of the screenwriting that you learned that ended up making it into the show? Can you give us an example?
Actually, yes, I was a journalist before, but after I started writing this script, I realized I was so blanked about China's in China's any method of Taiwan. It really scared me to death, actually, because I used to be a journalist. I have many friends who are still working in the media, and many of them told me that some news stories were written directly under the order of the Chinese communist. It's terrible that the news Taiwanese people watch is decided by Communist Party from China. It's happened now. And this is the topic of our third episode called On Air. And what surprised me most was the young people at the bottom of Taiwan society. They even looked forward to war because it would destroy Taiwan's social classes and given them a chance to climb up. It's the thinking of I think that's the thinking of China Cultural Revolution. It's the story of episode 2 called Snake Boy. As for political, military, and religions, and I don't even to bother asking people. There are already many communist spied cases every year. We can find them in court cases. And while we are writing this script, we feel that China's influence was truly terrified. It's all around us, our daily life already. That's why we wrote the line said the world has happened already.
Yeah. Well,
thank you.
Thank you very much for that. And I think it's I think as just as Kenton and the general were mentioning, I think you can see kind of the personal feelings, the personal experiences makes it right into the show. It's like it's obvious right there. That's the authenticity that comes from that experience. So appreciate that. So now let's turn back to General Minahan. Now, sir, you and I we both grew up during the Cold War, and Americans of our generation, of course, were raised on movies about how dangerous the Soviets were and the potential for war and even the potential for catastrophic nuclear war. But of course, in the end, the Cold War concluded, deterrence held firm. This turned out the Soviets were not actually 10 feet tall. And in retrospect, they just weren't as capable as they appeared in popular entertainment. And so perhaps they benefited to a degree from the intimidation factor of the way they were depicted, in American media and entertainment. But it seems like now the situation's reversed, right? I mean, so China really is not being depicted, as an adversary in popular entertainment. I'm sure you're familiar with the way that, for example, in the remake of Red Dawn, they turned the Chinese equipment into North Korean, just to be able to satisfy the criticisms from the PRC, and so. Perhaps this sort of thing is why we've had to work so hard to raise the awareness of the threat. So with this in mind, how do we balance that to avoid adding to the intimidation factor of our adversary, but still highlight enough the threat in order to galvanize the kind of action that you were talking about? Is there a role for popular entertainment in this? How do we balance this as part of thinking about how we counter the threat from peers?
A lot to unpack here, Marcus. So much. The first thing I'd say, our society when you and I grow up was really a whole of society, whole of nation approach to what was a legitimate threat. And regardless of whether their capability was deemed, was deemed worthy of our concern, we have to really grade it against their nuclear armed adversaries. And it doesn't really matter if their conventional capabilities turned out to be legit or not. We've never had a conventional war against a nuclear armed adversary in this way. And so, I mean, the exaggeration, I just don't think is possible when it comes to the amount of concern this just caused. This is concerning in terms of where this region plays in prominence with the world, over half the world's population, enormous amount of innovation, the abundance of commerce, nuclear armed armies, the largest armies, it all comes together in a very small portion of the globe. And it's an example of why this war could never happen. So there's that part of the exaggeration. We have a potential adversary in China specifically designing their armed forces to defeat a U.S. armed forces along with their partners and allies. So they know that they've got positional advantage. They know that we rely heavily on mobility and exploding into theater. They know that we've been, and I don't want to take away from the magnificence of operations and the bravery and the courage displayed by the U.S. and its partners and allies. but we've enjoyed permissive lines of communication, for the last 30 years, which means if you say you want to fight with us, give us 6 months, we'll get all our stuff there, and then we'll do it. Okay, and we won't have that opportunity with China. We'll have to fight from the mainland forward. We will be contested in all domains, and then if you just overlay the last lens, and there's plenty more, but the last lens I would say, and just look at the rhetoric of what the Chinese are doing with both their actions and their words. So they say they want Taiwan, and then almost every day they demonstrate in the first island chain, the second island chain, and beyond their joint military capabilities to project power at very long distances in very, very integrated manner that should cause us concern. So think about what they do in the first island chain. Think about how they circumnavigate Guam. Think about how they go north towards Alaska in a combined operation with the Russians. All those things are legitimate, and all those things are not over exaggerated, and they've got nuclear weapons. So I think I got that across there. Can there be a role? And I think this is where Kenton's going to go back to, and her opening comments were superb here. But this is about all domain, and I think China does it superbly. And I don't mean that as a compliment. I mean that as someone who's observing all of the full spectrum of the threat here. So first mover advantage in space, first mover advantage in cyber, and first mover advantage in information domains is incredibly critical, and they have all three of those right now. So, whether you're talking about Hollywood or this miniseries, we're really talking about the information domain, okay? And they are manipulating it. They are causing political strife in the United States. They're taking advantage of political strife on the island of Taiwan, in the region. They are counting on us to react emotionally and without reason in the information domain, and they're really driving hard. So think about that. They have more power inside our nation when it comes to the information we produce than America does. All right. Think about what Ms. Cheng said about having to sign a clause that say you will not make a political statement. I asked Siri the other day. Just because I was curious, I wanted to know the exact mileage between the island of Taiwan and Beijing, and she refused to answer. She refused to answer my question. She would not do it. No matter how I phrased it, no matter how detailed or precise I got, it just would not give me an answer. So that means to me that they are in, somehow in the algorithm that's going to drive an answer to me, and that's a very powerful place for them to be. So again, I believe we ceded first mover advantage in all the domains, the critical ones being space, cyber, and info. And I think that anything we can do, getting back to what Mr. Lim said, we're gonna create awareness, we're gonna create passion, hopefully we're gonna create action, and it's gonna complement the other instruments of national power. And we should not pass this up. You and I grew up on movies like Dr. Strangelove, No Way Out, Red Dawn, certainly the original, which was, I thought, awesome. We also were doing attack drills under our desks, right? We also got just as excited about the 1980 Olympic hockey team victory because of the whole of nation approach to the threat here. So I think we're on the right path here. I think insights like these that bring that human touch to the problem set that we hope never happens but may happen is really powerful. I'll end on this one. We have got to be precise on what's at stake here. This is, and I had an old boss at Indo-Pacom said, this is the first tremor on the international fault line of rules-based order. If we cannot cede our friends, our ally, our partner, Taiwan, we have got to be strong in this endeavor, because if we fail to be ready for both deterrence and fail to be ready for decisive victory, it's going to be much larger than a Taiwan problem. It's going to be a global problem. Thank you.
Powerful words, General, and I really appreciate your emphasis too. And in some ways, I hoist my own petard, as it were, here, where you're emphasizing the nuclear aspect, right? And that is one of the, of course, the things that we've emphasized in our work at the Atlantic Council is the potential for any conflict with the PRC or North Korea or in combination to end up in nuclear escalation, right? So you ultimately that is the part of the calculus, the threat that is hanging over this very situation as well. So moving though to the other end of the escalation spectrum, looking at the influence operations aspect. So Kenton, as you were alluding earlier, this just show. It features examples of the PRC's influence operations, cyber attacks, deep fakes. So any thoughts about how these would figure into greater aggression against Taiwan, against military attacks? How does that, what you've been seeing and what you anticipate and what you assess, how does that match with what you saw from those clips of the show? Is there anything that you'd like to highlight for us that we should be particularly concerned about?
Yeah, so I think there are several examples throughout the show that really highlighted the way that China would use the, social media information domain in the event of a conflict. And I think sort of one of the easier ways to sort of get a handle on this is to sort of think about the different audiences that the PRC would be targeting during this time. So first, the state would be targeting its own society, right? There are some messages that would need to go out. You would need to rally public opinion around this move. For the longest time, the PRC's sort of main narratives towards its own population is that we're one big Chinese family. The separatist forces within Taiwan are largely to blame, along with the U.S. For sort of the current tension and would be responsible for any action were it to occur. And so, the idea would be to say that Taiwan basically forced China to act here, and that this war is popular and it's widely supported. And then another message that would be delivered to the Chinese public would be that any sort of actors like the United States that are trying to intervene in this process would be trying to break up China. Secondly, Taiwan society obviously would be a target of these narratives. So, as we saw sort of in the show, there would be lots of efforts to induce doubts about Taiwan, the capabilities of Taiwan's leadership. There was I think in the trailer, there was, someone who was holding up some sort of social media post saying that the president had fled the island as a piece of disinformation. So sort of inducing confusion about Taiwan's leadership. The competency of the government to be able to launch a defense, to be able to, protect the island. That would be kind of a main narrative there. And also to create this sense of hopelessness, inevitability. There's no hope here. The U.S. is going to abandon Taiwan. Resistance is futile. Look at the overwhelming military might of the PRC. There's really no hope to resist. And we see some echoes of these narratives that China has deployed in confrontations in the Pacific, for example, in confrontations with the Philippines. These same messages of, we have this overwhelming, military force. Resistance is futile. And also the idea of, using influencers as well. The penetration of pro-PRC media is pretty deep in Taiwan society. And you have a lot of pro-PRC influencers. One thing that was really interesting to me was when you had the video of the girl who tries different foods and gives her reviews. And then right after she's like, and then, why aren't we signing a peace deal? The Chinese have said that we just need to sign a peace deal and all of this will be over. The government doesn't care about us. Let's just go ahead and do this. And so, that's a way that, the messages would definitely be delivered, activate this infrastructure of influencers, of social media assets to deliver this message and to kind of erode the will to fight, to resist. Third, Taiwan leadership would be the target of narratives and information operations. Inducing doubts about loyalty of people in different parties, inducing, sowing confusion and paranoia about, who might be collaborating, to spread narratives about, the mental faculties of the politicians in charge, doubts of just to create confusion, and to sort of create this feeling within Taiwan's leadership of needing to respond. Fourth would be third-party interveners, so the fourth bucket of the audience that China would be targeting. So, like the United States, for example, the efforts would be to obscure what China is actually doing, to depict Taiwan as not resisting, not fighting back. I think this administration's been pretty, has had some choice words about whether or not, Taiwan would stand up for itself. And that's been kind of a thing that has been picked up on by Chinese assets to sort of say, target the U.S. with, basically saying that Taiwan's not gonna fight for itself. It's all gonna be, U.S. And then really just confusing the state of play, trying to create confusion around what's actually going on the ground for these third-party interveners. And then lastly, the rest of the world. So, the global audience. This would be to sort of try and say that Taiwan's to blame. DPP forced the hand. This, separatist pro-independence movement was happening. This war is just. Taiwan's an internal matter. China's been sowing a lot of narratives in a lot of different countries, basically getting other countries to sign on to this idea that, Taiwan is part of China, and it's an internal matter. And so creating sort of foundations institutionally to erode Taiwan's sovereignty in the UN so that Taiwan doesn't have really a claim to sovereignty, and thus like the laws of war wouldn't really apply. And then, this kind of like reminded me of, again, like this peace agreement idea that was floated in 0 Day, where, China has like set up this blockade and then imposed this sort of, here's this agreement that we want you to sign. China would definitely, in this hypothetical scenario, really be hyping up that sort of peace agreement to the global community, saying like, look, we're here. Our hand was forced. Here's this peace agreement. All they need to do is sign it. We don't want to do this, but, that would be sort of the focus, is that, this is what, these are the things that China would be focusing on in the rest of the world. So I'll leave it at that. I've been talking for a long time, but I hope that kind of gives shape to how this can maybe play out and who the sort of main audiences would be for this.
Ken, thank you so much. I think that was a great explanation, and no need to apologize for being thorough, because there are so many different aspects to this. And so one of the things you said reminded me, actually, not just one of the many of the things you said actually reminded me of a line from the show that really resonated with me. And I'd like to go to Ms. Cheng to talk about this. So there's this line in the trailer that really kind of encapsulates a bit of what Beijing's approach is to this attack on Taiwan, and as Kenton's alluding, and of course, my Mandarin is terrible, but it translates as, you want your opponent to surrender, not to beat him to death, but to scare him into submission. So I suspect you wrote that line, and that's really a powerful statement, right? So what should people watching the PRC's actions in the show and in real life, as Kenton has described, what should they take away from that phrase, and what meaning does that have for you?
Thank you for you liking this line. Yes, I wrote it, and this line came to me when I thought about how many Taiwanese people keep saying, "Don't provoke China, or they will attack us." And where does this thinking come from? Isn't that China wants us to be afraid? And the more afraid we are, the easier it will be for them to make us give up fighting. I hope that after watching this, Taiwanese people can realize, like me, that China is trying to make us lose the power against them, and aware of that the war has begun. It's not a bomb, it's fake news, economic control, even the chips we are using every day. And everyday life, the world has surrounded us already. Yeah, that's what I thought. Thank you.
Yeah, and again, that whole idea that it's happening already, I think that's a recurring theme, right? So thank you very much for that. But that's a shilling line, right? But I think it just captures so much of the strategy and the approach that the Chinese Communist Party is taking. So, Mr. Lin, appreciating the language challenge here and your willingness to engage in this forum, I did want to ask you your thoughts on the overall more global situation while the show was in production. So how did you approach this? The fact that the show was in development while the aggression against Ukraine is ongoing, and the air and the maritime incursions around Taiwan from the PRC are escalating. How did this inform your thinking as executive producer?
过去这几年对台湾民众影响最大的2个国际事件，一个就是发生在香港的事情。
Okay, so in the past several years, actually, there are two main things that really happen and make Taiwan people aware is the Hong Kong issue and also the situation in Ukraine. And it's actually a great reminder to Taiwanese people about one message is actually don't never doubt dictators' ambition, and especially also never underestimate the dictators' regime, like how they would, get you. So actually, so this is actually the great message that we got, because of the two events, the incidents happened. So actually, the CCP had a lot of military drills over the years around Taiwan Strait. Is actually also all the aim is actually to create fear. So as the former U.S. President Roosevelt said, right, the most fearful thing is fear itself and the fear of unknown. So it's actually something they want to create, and so we need to actually get prepared and get awareness of the upcoming things that might happen. Because if you are afraid of it and you get prepared, the war is only the way to prevent the war from happening. And so that's also the zero-day attacks project want to express. As a executive producer, we're actually trying to bring awareness to not only Taiwanese people but also the global partners that joining us. Actually, we want to really express these ideas clearly. It's only the way to prevent war from happening.
而不是用恐惧来面对它，那这是我们唯一能够避免战争的方式。
Mr. Lin, thank you very much, and again, I appreciate your willingness to engage in this forum. So we've had some good conversation and discussion, and I'd like to remind the virtual audience to go to askac.org if you have any questions to add. I see the queue is already filling up with a lot of questions. But I think we definitely have some time to cover a few more here. And so I'd like to go back to General Minahan. And so General Minahan, there's been a lot of ground that we've covered here in the nature of the threat that the PRC poses and some of the elements that you emphasize. But recognizing, that the American, public, has such a limited understanding, and I think many of the people in Taiwan have such a limited understanding of the nature of this threat and its complexity. Is there one particular thing that you would like people in Taiwan, in America, elsewhere in the world to really keep in mind about this threat? Something that they may not understand, they may have a misconception about. What would be that one thing that you would really want to make sure that people have in their minds?
It's a great question, and I'll answer the question very quickly, and then reverse engineer it just a little bit. The one thing I would want to make the dominant thought is for people to understand, regardless of where you live, that China wants to win without fighting. Certainly in the remarks from Ms. Chang and Mr. Lin, they hit that pretty soundly. China wants to win without fighting. I heard a senior leader in uniform about 2.5 years ago say the object is not to fight, and I don't believe that. I don't believe that. The object is not to lose. Okay, I hope we can do that without fighting. But if it takes fighting, then that's what it takes, because we cannot fight and lose this very easily. In fact, I would say that in certain domains we've already done that. So, the takeaway here is we have got to drive overt extreme readiness, not just from the U.S., but all partners and allies, including Taiwan. We've got to be integrated, agile, and ready. We've got to be in a position of strength. When China wakes up and looks at us, they got to see something that they don't want to take on and that they don't feel they're ready for. The 3 pillars of deterrence that I ascribe to are: we have to communicate will, we have to impose costs, and we have to deny benefit. Those are the three pillars that I look at. And all 3 of those come with a strong hand in all of the nation's military instruments of power. I realize that there is much more power as national power comes together than just the military. Certainly the diplomatic, certainly informational, which we talked about, and then the economic. And we've got to wield those from a position of strength because they're oh so critical into doing those things. Communicating well through action, imposing costs, and denying benefit are absolutely there. I don't want to fight either, but I don't want to lose more. We have got to be oriented on that, and that's going to take a really magnitudinal shift in the way we're thinking. Regardless of whose timeline you ascribe to, 2027, you think it's 2030, 2035, whatever the timeline is. If you knew it was going to be in the next 10 years, you need to be spending like it's happening tomorrow right now, and we're simply not doing that. So aligning those resources on that deterrence, which also delivers decisive victory, that's where we got to be oriented. Thank you.
General, thank you very much. And this whole idea of the goal is to win, not just to not fight. Now, obviously, the best way, as you said, the best way to win is to win by deterring the adversary entirely, right? But it's that willingness and capability to fight that ultimately is going to secure the freedoms of democracies that are under attack from the PRC.
Let me reattack real quick, sure, Marcus, because it's worth saying this, because Miss Chang's comments were perfect on this. Yeah. Okay, when people think we don't want to provoke China, that means their deterrence is working. Let's be clear. Right. When you say that, you are saying China is deterring me because I'm scared of what they might do. It's no position to be in. So if we're in it, we need to get out of it aggressively, and I think that's a very powerful way to look at it. Over.
Right. Now that's a spectacular point, right? And the same is true, I think, of all 3 of our and more really of our axis of authoritarians or axis of aggressors that we call them. All of them are sort of in the mode of trying to intimidate us into avoiding provoking them when in reality they're the aggressors, right? So that's a spectacular point. Again. If you're interested in asking a question, please go ahead and input it in askac.org. And now let's go to Kenton. And I'm going to ask you a similar question to what I asked General Minahan. In your specialty, you've been analyzing, researching the PRC's information warfare and their influence operations and proposing strategies of how to address them. And thinking about all the range of issues that you just explored and that we've been discussing through the session, is there one particular aspect of the threat, one particular issue that you'd like to emphasize to our viewers, to people in Taiwan, the United States, and elsewhere around the world concerned about this threat? What should they know? What's the top item you think they should know about this threat?
Well, no pressure, but but I think I can pick up on General Minahan's comments, that a theme that kind of this brought up when he was speaking, that, you know, narratives can be deployed to, you know, for offensive purposes, but also they can actually go both ways. They can end up binding you or constraining you in certain ways. Just as one example, you know, China, as folks here have said, China wants to would want to win this swiftly, decisively, preferably with little bloodshed. And this is, you know, in part because, you know, for years and years, part of the messaging to its own domestic population has been that, you know, China and Taiwan are one big family. The tolerance for the domestic Chinese population for seeing images of, you know, killed Taiwanese children on the streets would be fairly low. And this would be a symptom of China really trying to foster these like strong ties. And so, you know, when you have on the one hand, China messaging to their population that, you know, we're all just one big family anyway, the ability to really take on a protracted violent struggle really decreases. And I would just, what I would tell the audience is that China's not as monolithic as we think. They're incredibly sensitive to domestic pressures, and will very much need to control what the public sees and how it sees it. And that is a huge weakness for them as well. We saw when we were doing our studies of, you know, Chinese domestic social media platforms, the top manipulated events on what we were looking at was Weibo of, you know, like 2022 and 2023 were international events, highly controlling what China's public saw and said and thought about China's actions in Ukraine, China's actions, you know, abroad with regards to different conflict scenarios. And this is because, you know, another narrative has been China's non-interference and China's a peaceful nation. And so these narratives that they've worked very hard to sow can be sort of leveraged against them were this to become a protracted or a violent kind of engagement. So I just wanted to say that sometimes these narratives can go both ways, and don't discount the extreme sensitivity of the Chinese government to the Chinese public. Unrest in the streets is the biggest nightmare, hands down, of the CCP. They do not want that. And so that is an area of weakness to kind of consider.
Ken, that's great, and really something interesting to think about, this potential, which I will say appeals to the strategist in me, of how to go on the counteroffensive and how to make the adversary themselves feel fear, right? And so that is I think a very important angle to recognize. This is not just purely passive defense of hardening yourself, but you have to be prepared to go on the attack as much in the informational space as in the military space or the diplomatic space or the economic space. So I think that's a really excellent point. So now I'm transitioning. I actually had a whole series of additional questions that I wanted to ask and things that I was interested in. But we've got some questions piling up here, and I want to make sure that we get a chance to ask some of those. And so for the next one, I'd like to go to May, and one of those asking question here is curious as to has anything surprised you so far about the various responses to the series? How does the global reception compare to the domestic reception so far? And of course, globally, most people haven't seen the show, right? And so just for context, my understanding is it's really just Taiwan and Japan right now that can actually watch the full show. So, but obviously there's a lot of information getting out about the show. So Meg, what do you think about the response so far?
The show has aired its 5th episode in Taiwan and Japan now, And I hope soon will be in American too, and the whole world can see it. And maybe in the end of the year, I hope. And many of my friends told me that they and their parents vote for different political parties every time, but they watch Zero Day Attack together and discuss it together. And I think this is a very good thing. We open a gate for discussing this kind of topic. And I don't know if people in Taiwan or other free countries will learn anything from watching this, but at least it has captured everyone's attention and opened the door for discussions. I think after watching this show, people will notice that Chinese government is trying different ways to influence free countries, and they try to control our mind. This is a good start. I think the show is a good start, right? Yes, that's what I say.
Right.
Thank you.
No, it's heartening to hear that the international, the domestic response is showing that it's resonating, and look forward to seeing how it unfolds. And of course, as you said before, we look forward to being able to watch it in the United States as well, because I do think this is very important. So that's great to hear. So now we've got another question here for General Minahan. And so this comes from Captain Christian Bradley, and he asks, Sir, what can be instituted immediately at the junior officer or cadet level to not only facilitate literacy in the PRC's stratagems, but to integrate a curriculum to bridge the tactical, operational, strategic gap when combating the PRC? If I can paraphrase a little bit, this whole idea of there's a strategic element to confronting the PRC and there's tactical and operational elements. How do we educationally bridge that, and what can be done at even the junior levels of the military to really help the U.S. military personnel understand the nature of the threat?
Yeah, I think it's, first of all, we worked really hard over the past, especially my time in Indo-PACOM, to really be precise in what military organizations need to do. If I were counseling a junior officer, I'd say, if I had a magic wand and I could cast one spell, it would say, just do your job really well. I mean, let's not forget, it takes all of us to be a lethal, maneuverable team, regardless of your service, regardless of your rank, regardless of what you do. Your value is not proportional to your proximity to the cockpit. Everybody has enormous value in putting a joint lethal force downrange in a position of advantage so that it can do what this nation asks of it. So, my overall is young captain, do your job and be awesome, be amazingly awesome at it. But to the intent of the question here, I think it used to drive me. It didn't drive me nuts, but I always chuckled a little bit when people were saying, hey, we need to study China. And I'm like, we do. Sun Tzu, okay? I mean, it lays it all out very clearly on win without fighting. All of the things that they're playing here are from a lens that's not a Western lens. We got to make sure that we're not using what we're used to in terms of provocation, in terms of escalation, in terms of rules of engagement and things like that. We got to look through it through a lens, through an Asian lens, certainly, but we also have to look at the philosophies that already exist, that we've already been exposed to, and just apply them to this current challenge. So I know that especially in my command when I was leaving and in the Air Force, that they were working very hard to bring tabletop exercises and even board game type approaches that lay out kind of the strategy down to the operational level, down to the tactics level, so that the people that are in the tactics level can be exposed to the big levers that are moving above them. I think that's all good. That's a generational thing. That's much different than you and I grow up, where we were just told to shut up and color, right? And so this generation is magnificently talented. They absolutely have the capacity to understand much more than just their tactical level, which was probably something I was challenged at the tactical level. But we got to make sure that we're applying the things that already exist that we can use. We need to overlay it with the new tools that the leadership and the institutions are giving. And then I think we need to simply, ensure that we're living up to our oaths of office. Whether you're enlisted, whether you're officer, whether you're civilian, regardless of your service, we've got an obligation to well and faithfully discharge the duties. And we've got to be really good at that. This gets back to be really good at your job. So I think the captain's question was on point. And then I'll end on this one. And we have got to generate a style of leadership that goes back to decades, where we are rewarded for taking risks. We are rewarded for being aggressive. We are rewarded for understanding second and third order levels of risk, and we're not taking reckless risk. But we have got to drive a readiness that doesn't exist now and hasn't existed in a while. And in order to regain it, we really have to be uncomfortable in our approach in a good way. So I would really, and certainly what I was doing is delegate authority, protect the risk takers. Don't hammer people in the traditional manner when things go wrong, and really move out aggressively to get our jobs done. Over.
General, thank you very much, and I think that's a great professional military education for the captains. So I appreciate you taking the time. All right, so now I do want to get to a few more questions before we come to the end of our time, and I have one here that's been directed to Kenton by an anonymous query here. So this actually, to be fair, does relate to actually one of the questions I had queued up. And so I noticed that Kenton, your work has included looking at AI and the role of AI and how the PRC is advancing AI. And so the question here, though, that comes is that the AI and deepfake tools are making it increasingly easy for authoritarian governments to misinform their own people and the global population. What tools and strategies can the people of Taiwan and their global partners employ to differentiate between the true facts and the false narratives put forward by the PRC?
Yeah, so I think this raises a really important point, and I'm glad the topic of AI was brought up, because it's kind of an essential component of any conversation on, disinformation, information operations today. On AI, kind of longer term, we haven't seen it really change the way that people engage with disinformation. It has certainly increased the sort of the slop that's out there. It's increased confusion. It can be much more effective, though, in fast changing scenarios where this, this 0-day discussion is most relevant, right? So, something that says the president has left, that's not AI, but that's pretty effective. But, a deep fake of, the center of government blowing up, that's also that's AI generated, and that can also really make people believe that something has happened. But it doesn't really, the content itself doesn't really kind of change the basic delivery platforms, and the fact that people just generally now are having a low level of trust in the information they see online. So this is what AI has done, is that people just really are starting to not trust anything that they're seeing on social media platforms. So what does this mean? It does in a fast changing scenario, it can facilitate the effective disinformation in, creating confusion, sowing doubt, delaying decision making, creating a lag in, policymaker decision making, and being able to kind of react quickly to events as they're unfolding. But one thing that I'm actually sort of monitoring, or we at DFR Lab are monitoring a little bit more now, is that as the sort of information environment in general, people aren't really trusting anything that they see, they're turning more to actually like AI chatbots to verify are asked, is this AI? So you'll have like an original piece of disinformation or even a deep fake, and then somebody will be, say, on, X, for example, and then ask Grok, is this AI? And one sort of problem that's arising that we saw during the Iran-Israel conflict was that people were asking Grok to verify certain AI-generated images, and Grok was inaccurately or incorrectly saying something was real when it was in fact AI-generated, or the opposite. So we have this kind of weird inception, moment where there is disinformation out there. People just don't trust what they see on the regular platform. Now they're using AI generated chatbots, and it creates this sort of veneer of truth that comes over AI generated disinformation. I know that's kind of convoluted, but that's something that is like unfolding that in the context of like a wartime scenario that I think is relevant to raise with the audience. So, I think what this question really gets to too is there really is a supply side issue with this stuff. Platforms increasingly are not being held to transparency standards. They have they're left to like self-regulate as an industry. And when we understand just that platforms are critical information infrastructure that can be used in these ways, it really is kind of a supply side issue around, platforms and what's on these what's being allowed to kind of proliferate on these platforms. And so we're all kind of at the mercy of this self-regulation. I'll leave it at that as we only have about 5 minutes left, but hopefully that got at the sort of some of the crux of the question.
Kenton, thank you. And I feel like we could have a whole seminar just on countering AI as used by the PRC. No, that's phenomenal. Very helpful. So now we'll go to the last question because, as Kenton pointed out, we're getting close to the end of time. And so I'd like to give the privilege here to the newest member of the IPSI team, a visiting military fellow from Taiwan, Major Vincent Shen. He says here that the series definitely raised Taiwan's awareness toward the potential crisis, and it has been phenomenal work. So he's praising the zero-day attack producers here. But my question would be, since it's a government-assisted production, it's easy to receive disagreements from those of the Taiwan population who possess different political leaning. And so this might further degrade the desired effectiveness of the messages that the zero-day team is trying to send. So how does the zero-day attack team think about this? Is there a way to mitigate this perception? Thank you. So in the interest of time, May, did you want to take a swing at that one?
Actually, after we have been released our film unaired, and we have been attacked by many people and many politicians in Taiwan, and they don't think we got a very simple purpose. And initially, we don't even think about the politics and to do this show. And all of including me and the other directors and Mr. Lind, we just initially we have very simple ideas, and we just express that Taiwan is a free country. It's different from China, and we have been influenced by China and attacked by China, and it's not like bomb. It's a lot of fake news and economic control, such as these things, and we want to address that, and we want to aware us Taiwanese people war is really coming, because Taiwan has been facing this kind of Taiwan and China conflict, just what I said before, over 70 years, and many people in Taiwan even used to it, and we think the war maybe never come. Just like God, we live in this kind of situation for such a long time, and people start to think the war maybe not coming. But in fact, we have to notice that aircraft is surrounding Taiwan all the time, and it's getting close this day. And for this whole island, for the whole society, was I think it's controlled by China in many aspects. They control media, they control politics, they control religions, and when Zero Day released, and we have been attacked by many aspects, and all this attack comes from Taiwan itself. So I think sometimes it's a little bit, not a little bit, it troubles me a lot, and I feel very sad about that. And even one of our director was attacked by politicians these days, and they say they have he has stolen a lot of money from government, and that's nonsense. And so it's not easy to produce or release this kind of film in Taiwan. And now I realize and why there is no anyone want to do this kind of story before.
Yeah, no, it sounds like a very challenging situation. We appreciate your forthrightness in explaining some of the things that you've been dealing with, and I appreciate Major Shen asking, what's a sensitive question? So I really appreciate all of you taking the time to have this discussion with us, and I feel like we could go on for probably another hour. But this is the time I think which we need to wrap up here, and so I'd just like to recap a few of the key points that to me came away from this. And first, and I think is foremost, is really the importance and the value of this sort of conversation, this way of engaging with the media, with entertainment, to inform thinking about the nature of the threats posed by the PRC, and have a broader understanding. I think that's to me the first takeaway. So whether it's a zero-day attack, whether it's other forms and formulations, and engaging really with the public to heighten awareness and understanding, I think is valuable and key. A second thing that comes across that's really important to really raise the public understanding, but also for ourselves to internalize, is the idea that the war started long ago, right? The PRC has been conducting this war now for decades, and the escalation that we've seen should not lead us to forget that this has been an ongoing effort for a long time, and could go on for much longer before it gets to the point of actual open, more traditional types of warfare. Another key idea that came across is the idea of the PRC seeking to intimidate, to leverage, to get a surrender without actually having to use force, right? And I think on some level we think about that as we consider the threat from the PRC, but that phrase, that idea, that line that you wrote about the essentially the goal to not to beat not to beat Taiwan to death, but to get Taiwan to surrender. I think that's very powerful. And so General Minahan's point that you have to be willing to fight and show the capability and willingness to fight in order to prevent defeat, and then ultimately to deter the adversary from actually bringing that fight to you. That's to me really key. And so that comes not just from the military, but it comes from the whole of society's willingness to resist and to be unwilling to surrender in the face of the PRC intimidation and their information warfare tactics, including, as Kenton mentioned, some of these more advanced and growing capabilities, even enabled by artificial intelligence. So that's all the time we have for this conversation. That brings this Cross-Strait and Beyond seminar to a close. And I want to really appreciate TechRo's support for this program. and the Ambassador Yu's willingness actually to join us and give opening remarks. And so this particular seminar ends now, but the conversation doesn't end here. Work of the Atlantic Council, the Scowcroft Center, and its Indo-Pacific Security Initiative, and particularly our Tiger project, is going to continue. These discussions will be had in public, in private, in tabletop exercises, war games, seminars, conversations, study trips, and we look forward to engaging both with the members here in this group and to those of you watching in the audience to help better inform our thinking about the various threats posed to security in the Indo-Pacific and the ways that we can work together to meet those challenges as free peoples trying to counter sort of intimidation and aggression that we just talked about today. So I encourage you to visit the Atlantic Council website and view our products, our videos, including, of course, where you're going to see the video for this session. And I really look forward to the next opportunity and to our next Cross-Strait and Beyond seminar. So again, thank you all very much to the panelists. And to our audience, look forward to speaking again soon. Thank you.